day 2 of voting. So I guess I might as well give you guys a little backstory. Before this right here happened, I was outside. I wasn't reckless, but I was outside. Met a few friends at the bar after work. Then boom, this fine joke. Boy, that man was fine. Ooh, my God, today. Anyway, that ain't the point of the story. Met him and went crazy for a little bit. Fussing and fighting, we back at it. No, for real though. Long story short, by the end of the summer, child, the test was positive. My God. Child, that lust and spirit will have you in a bind. So what's next? You have to have the conversation. I'm pregnant. Oh my God. But nah, y'all, I gotta hold myself accountable. I really did come at that man wrong when I announced. Because we only really got along during demon time, I was already on the fence when I made the announcement that I'm expecting. And there are so many moving parts to this story, but long story short, the end of the conversation ended with do it the hard way. That's what I was told. And in my brain, I'm thinking, I think the hard way would be for me to stay. So, here we are. So I guess I'll finish my story time. Yes, my goal was to be a celebrity stylist. Yes, my career was taking off. I was starting to bump elbows with higher up, all of the things. But once I found out that I was pregnant, he became the most important thing. I can't say that the moment that I found out that I was pregnant, that I did not know that I would be doing it alone. I knew that it was a large possibility that I was going to be a single mother. And I chose to go through with it. And once I saw his face, none of that mattered anymore to me. I literally left everything. I left all my furniture. Whatever I could fit in my car was my dog, my TV, my baby, and my sister. Maybe some clothes. I left everything. Honestly, I was in a place where I didn't know what I was going to do. I don't know if it was postpartum or I really don't know. I just know I was in a place of where I didn't want to do hair anymore. I just didn't know what we were going to do. As soon as they circumcised that baby, we was on the road. And I look back on it like, that was a really hard time. And I'm not saying this to complain or, complaining about the sacrifices I made. My sacrifice put me on the path that God wanted me to be on. And I stand on that. I stand on it. Because the path that I was going down, even though it was glamour in my mind, it was not for me at that time. Thinking about that pivotal moment in my life. Finally getting the hang of being a mom, getting the courage to start all over again, finding a passion for hair again, a happier version of me. I was like, okay, I can do this. We can make our way. Now I just need to fill this void. I spent the first 2 years trying to overcompensate and find my baby a daddy. That sounds so horrible coming out now, but that's where we were the first 2 years. Vote, part 3 tomorrow. Grand Rising, happy Friday, all the things. So, back to where I left off when I said I spent the first 1 or 2 years trying to overcompensate and find my baby a father to fill the void. Let me explain. When I found out I was pregnant, I was excited, don't get me wrong, but I prayed for a girl because I'm like, what am I gonna do? Like, I cannot teach this boy how to be a man. That's just something I cannot do. And yes, I have, brothers, and I have a stepfather to help me build a boy, but at the time, I just was like, I need somebody in his life to help him be the man that God called him to be. So for the first year, I would consider that the grace period that I gave his biological father, as far as me being willing to allow him to say, look, it was my bad for not being present. It's killing me to not know who my son is. I mean, this is a boy. It's not saying a little girl, but it's a son, and what I thought was your firstborn son. I don't know that man, so I don't know. He can have 12 million kids. So me, just really obsessing over it and hoping that he would reach out, doing research as far as finding his family members online, gathering my information, hoping that something will break through. And Liam was born, and he reached out within the first month, but the conversation was not, I wasn't hearing him. There was a contingency. I was wanting to talk about our son, whereas that wasn't what the conversation was about. I already knew, but I'm just like, look, you're using not being sure if he's yours as an excuse. So to ease your mind, I don't mind, because I already know where I've been throwing it at. And then he ended up saying, well, what is that going to change? And I didn't get it. It took me a long time to get it. That comment sent me for the first year, it sent me into a fit of rage. Like, okay, look, if you ain't gonna do it, I'm gonna get somebody else to do it. That was what I was on. And I was also on, my son don't want for nothing, I'm gonna make sure he don't feel your absence. That was my mentality. Not making wise decisions financially just to make sure that my 1-year-old who isn't even really conscious yet knows that he don't need a damn daddy. Not that he don't need a daddy, he don't need his daddy. I'ma find him somebody better to do it. God distracted me from my rage. He sat me down because it's like you're taking for granted what you do have. You have a support system out of this world, and your child loves these people. I've given you all the tools you need to make this a success, but you're pretty much saying it's not good enough. When my mom ended up catching what we thought was a cold, and within days, she was on life support. So it's like everything, my son wasn't even walking yet, and everything that I had found balance on was shattered. It's crazy how that happened. I think I'm gonna be 8 this year. He was barely 1. It was around this time, 7 years ago. And I still can't tell the story without getting emotional. But anyway, I'm not one of them. I ain't the person that just be emotional in front of people. It's just sometimes you can't hold it. This is part 3 of the story. Another day of voting. And I'll be back with the rest of the story. I appreciate y'all voting. Continue to vote. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity. So back to life support. Let me explain to you how life was when I moved home. My mom was just like, look, y'all just come home. You can figure it out. So when I got home, I didn't have any bills. All I had was a car payment. I went from the rat race of having all the bills in Atlanta and booth rent and just really wanting to be free of that, wanting to be free of the first of the month for a little while just to get ahead, because it's like you're making good money, but you're also paying good money. And I was honestly just exhausted. So it was a breath of fresh air to come home and not dread the first of the month. So I'm home. When I do get my mind together, I'm able to work in my mom's salon for free. I'm able to stay in her house for free. All I have to do is make sure that me and my baby straight as far as diapers, food. That's all I have to do. On top of just looking out for me and myself, my support system is A1. If I need somebody to watch my child while I'm at work, my aunt is up the road. That's like his second mom. If I want to hang out, my mama is in the next room. Even in my singleness, my cup ran over when it came to the support with my son, and I didn't have to question his safety. I'm not saying that family is always a safe go-to when it goes to your children, but I knew without a shadow of a doubt he was in hands that were a duplicate of mine when he was with these people. That gave me comfort. Older people used to say, y'all rock that baby, she's gonna have another one. Even though I was grown as hell by then, I get it now, because it's like I had the comfort of not really feeling the heat of just being alone in parenthood. With that, I took it for granted prior to my mom being hospitalized. And then she gets a cold, and for that first week, she's going back and forth to the doctor just to get it in check or see. They're giving her steroids, and it may work over the night, but when she goes to work and comes home, she's right back to square one. Just playing it back, I can still feel my frustration, because when my mom got home from work that night, they stopped to get something to eat, and she was at the table. We were all in the kitchen, and she was about to eat, and she was just like, I can't breathe. And I'm like, she was like, I feel like if I have some tea, it'll help. So, fix her some tea, and she was like, I still can't breathe. So I'm like, okay, well, you need to go to the hospital. So my stepdad takes her to the hospital. I get the baby together, and then we head to the hospital. The doctors run their tests or whatever, and it's past midnight at this point, and we're still sitting in a room waiting for the results. So mind you now, I'm still on edge because I'm bucked up about the baby daddy. I'm just bucked up. And, the nurses keep walking past. Yes, they're pacifying the situation with oxygen. But I'm like, hey, this is a doctor. Hey, did you get the results back? I think they did the results at like maybe 8 or 9. And like I said, it's past midnight. And she's like, oh yeah, she has bilateral pneumonia and the flu. So I'm like, okay, what does this mean? Is this contagious? She was like, oh yeah, it's highly contagious. Here I am sitting in here and it was in March. I can't count. About 8-month-old, 9-month-old baby. And we all live in the same home. And you just casually say, oh yeah, it's bilateral pneumonia. Never mind her, but I'm just telling you where my rage was already. So I'm like, okay, I don't feel like it helps for any of us to be sitting in this room. Now that we know what it is, we can get on board to treatment. So Mom, I'm going to take the baby home because we already showing symptoms of having whatever you have. So I'm going to take the baby home and, we're going to stay in contact via phone until they can get you right. This just means, you're going to have to sit down and rest for a while. That was a Friday night. Saturday morning, I get a call. Hey, your mom's going to go on the vent. My heart started beating fast from there when I heard the word vent. But then the way my stepdaddy explained it, he said that the doctor said her body needs rest so that it can do what it needs to do. So in order to do that, she needs to go on voluntary ventilation. So I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So even though I was anxious, it calmed me down the way they presented it. And then he was like, the airlift her to Wilmington because I guess that's protocol. That's the way he presented it to me. And because you're on the vent, that's why you have to be in ICU. So my brain calms down from this because it's like, oh, okay, this is just procedure. Yes, it's bad, but all is not lost. She just needs rest. So she's airlifted to Wilmington. Me and my baby are home sick. And I'm thinking, what can I do in the meantime to rest my brain, to keep myself calm? Okay, this is a bad cold that she's going to have to recover from, which means that financially things fall on me because my stepdad is disabled. So I'm like, okay, I need to be coming up with a plan for us to carry us for a while. Even though I'm distracting myself with figuring out finances and what we were going to do, calling to the hospital to check on my mom, and the report is still stagnant. Like, she hasn't gotten any better, but she hasn't gotten any worse. So I'm like, okay, well, no bad news is good news. And the thing about the flu is there really is no medication to treat this. So it's like, they're alternating Tylenol and pretty much just keeping her comfortable until it passes. Tuesday comes around and it's time for me to go to work. So usually I take my son to my aunt's, and that's where he is while I work. So I get there and my aunt was like, they didn't call you? And I'm like, no, like what is it? And my heart sank when I, like what is it? And she's like, they need the family to come to the hospital. I'm like, the family? What do you mean the family comes to the hospital? And as I'm saying that, my grandmother pulls up crying. So I'm like, what's happening right now? And I'm like, what is it? They say, your mom is not doing well. They want the family to be there. So I'm just like, no, I'm not going to accept that. Even though I broke down, it was just, I could not help it. It was involuntary that I broke down. I'm just like, I cannot accept that. I was like, can you just please take my baby? I'm going to ride by myself. I don't need anybody in my ear. I just want me and God in this car. I don't want to talk to nobody else. I don't want to hear from anybody else. I'll say that was the first time that I think this might be the hardest story to tell. I was trying to say that was the first time that I actually sat alone. Oh, look, my glass. That I actually sat alone with God. I mean, all of the years of church going, really not even knowing if I believed. God put me in a place where I had no choice but to believe. This was a pivotal moment in my life, so I have to share the details of how I became the person that I am today. So bear with me. This is my story. Part 4, or story time part 4, has multiple parts. This is part 1. Today your vote counts twice. And so if you don't mind, or if you can resonate with my story, or if my story touches you, click the link and vote. On to part 4.2. That was the first time that God had my attention. I had been so distracted by shenanigans my entire adult life till I didn't even consider worst case scenarios. I'm not even 30. I'm not about to lose my mom. They don't realize that life is not promised to anybody. So I get there and I didn't even park my car. I just got to the building and got out. And I just needed to get back there to her. It was scary when I got there because I've never seen my stepdad cry. I'm like, no, this looks like defeat. We will not be defeated in this. I don't even know where that version of me came from. And when I got in ICU, all I could see was her her body in the bed. I couldn't look at her directly or get close to her. I was just like, look, I need to speak with the doctor. I need to hear, like, what are the options? What are you saying? I need this clear. So I speak with the doctors. Well, we want to do this procedure called ECMO. Don't get me wrong, doctors and nurses. But from my understanding, it was like putting oxygen into her blood. It just did not sound like the move. I was hearing them, but I wasn't hearing them. The thing about it is, it had to be me that went in there and spoke to those doctors. I didn't know that then, but it's just crazy how divine intervention works. That's another story for another day. But it had to be me that spoke to those doctors. And I was just like, okay, I hear what you're saying about ECMO, but what are the other options? And the doctor's like, well, there is another ventilator that we can try, where it actually pumps in the oxygen and it holds it and then it releases. Because the vent that she's on right now is just pretty much like a hand pump, but on a machine. So it's just pumping. So I was like, can we try this before we go to drastic measures of ECMO? And if that does not work, then we'll do that. I didn't understand what I was saying at the time. I was just like, we're going to do this and we're going to pray and we're going to have faith. Not that I'm against praying all those things, but just the way that I was moving in that time, a transition had happened and I didn't even know it. So they changed the vent, and we pray, we fast, and we wait. Some people don't do therapy because of this. It's hard to go back through traumatic experiences, but it's necessary. I felt like I was on guard the entire time we were at that hospital. Just to give you an idea of how drastic things were, normal oxygen level 98, 99, 100. That's without assistance. My mom was breathing at 50% with the ventilator. And I can't remember the numbers as far as what was showing up in her blood as far as oxygen, but we were in deep water. I remember my friend Rena coming to the hospital, her and her husband Kevin, and she was just like, I'll take the baby. You go to the hotel, you take a shower, and you get you some rest. I felt like the anchor during that time. I knew that if I fell apart, my siblings would fall apart. And I couldn't have that because we were keeping things positive. We were keeping things that were not positive away. But me having that time for her to just keep my baby, because I did not want to break down in front of him, even though he doesn't understand. So when I went back to that hotel, I was able to release. I became the version of me in that moment that walked by faith. Nothing else mattered. No other relationship mattered but the relationship I had with God. Even the relationship with my mom. Just saying, look, God, I trust you no matter what. If it means that you have to take her, I trust that was the plan. That was the hardest prayer I ever prayed. I was just tired. When I prayed that prayer, I don't know if that was the breakthrough, if the devil was like, I ain't gonna be able to get her no matter what. I don't know, but I was able to hear her voice within a few days from that. So there's that. I ain't even gonna hold y'all. This story, even though it was a pivotal moment, it is heavy to tell. And I don't like telling sad stories. Like, of course I like to help, and if it resonates, sometimes I share my grief journey as far as dealing with my dad, but it bothers me that I could possibly like trigger somebody in this or just spread sadness on my timeline, even though there is victory in this story. The process of telling it is heavy, and it is heavy to tell. I can't tell it with a dry eye. So I just ask that y'all bear with me. If you can't take it, I understand. It's a part of who I am, and you wouldn't understand unless I told it. So when I went back to that hotel, I was able to release. I became the version of me in that moment that walked by faith. I was just tired. I think I need to give you guys an idea of what I meant by being tired. In hindsight, I realized that even though I started a journey with prayer and fasting, that's what I felt led to do in my spirit. But at the same time, I was so caught up in a religious lifestyle that I didn't know how to properly trust God. Yeah, God, I trust you, but I need to go back here and just ask the doctors again. Yes, God, I trust you, but I don't want to eat this before 7 o'clock and then her numbers fail. I'm saying that I'm walking by faith, but nah, I'm operating in self still. Still worrying. I'm looking for reassurance and validation in these doctors and these nurses. And there's a funny thing about doctors and nurses. They will deliver a piece of bad news with whatever good news they may give you just to keep you realistic. So you have to come through the door with hope and with faith, because you're amongst a crowd of people who have lost hope based on the day-to-day things that they've seen. They don't believe in the unseen. But there was one nurse, she said that she was from Africa. I think I need to add the fact that even though she said she was from Africa, but it was not obvious because she was white. She had a strange accent, but I had to ask where she was from because I knew she wasn't from the U.S. This was the night before my friend came and offered to watch my baby. And I'm just questioning her like I'm questioning the other nurses. Her vibe was completely different. She was really just taking her time, cleaning my mom, oiling her down, and just really taking care of her. And I'm asking her questions, trying to gain reassurance from her. And she paused and she said, we do what we can, but the rest is up to God. That was the only nurse that said anything about God. I'm surrounded by the strongest people I know in my life, and I see the hopelessness in their eyes. You instill a faith-based religion in me, and I cannot find that in your aura. It's always pray, don't have faith of a mustard seed, but I felt like I was the mustard seed. I'm convinced she was an angel, but that was an aha moment, because it's like, Ebony, you're doing all this stressing and trying to get reassurance from people that truly don't know. You have to let go and let God. You have to let go and trust God. Back to story time. Let's talk about confirmation in the entire situation with my mom's life support. I often reflect on how God just aligned things so perfectly. I think about me deciding to move home after having Liam. What if I would have stayed in Atlanta? I know that it wouldn't have been impossible, but it would have made things much harder for me to balance a life in Atlanta as well as trying to be there for my mom in this time. I also think about there was only a limited amount of time you can be on the ventilator before they have to do tracheotomy, which means putting something to help you breathe in your throat. The doctor actually explains the procedure of the tracheotomy, and I hope I'm saying that right. And my mom is a singer, so I'm like, okay, explain that to me again, because will this affect her vocal cords? Like, I'm worried because her voice has been a part of her character her entire life. So I'm like, again, they can't give you an answer on whether or not it will or it won't. You just have to let them practice per usual. So, and that's in the back of my mind. And at this point, I'm able to get back on social media, and my cousin shares this.
I trust in God. I trust in God. Wherever I may be, I trust in God. On the mountain peak, I trust in God. Out on the stormy sea, I trust in God. And below they may roll, He keeps my soul, yes He does. My heavenly Father watches over me, yeah. Ooh.
About to move the tray. How you feel, Mom? So we make it past this point, and my mom is finally able, you can finally hear her voice now. And she says, I dreamed you were fighting for me. She tells her own testimony of the actual experience in depth. In that story, she's in some type of situation, and I'm gunning people down, gunning these demons down, trying to rescue her. Little old me. I learned in this situation, I learned whose I am. Coming a single mom, it made me question, why me? How did I end up in the exact situation that I said I would never be in, because I watched my mom go through this, and I'm like, that won't be me. That's not what I want for myself. In that why me, I'm looking to try to fill this void that society has created in my head. I learned in this situation that I am enough. I learned in this situation that God has provided me with everything I need to raise my son, and that there's no need for me to look for the things that I lack, because he has me every step of the way. He has us every step of the way. I feel that in this situation, God was showing me, he was showing me that he's always been there. He was showing me it's always been aligned, while I'm dwelling on the fact that my child's father is not present. He's showing me that he wasn't a part of the journey. He wasn't a part of the plan. He was just a part of the process. And I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. Not only trust, but also accept and know that you are enough for your child. There is no void. I was transformed as a mother in this situation with my mom, because God realigned my principles. Growing up in the church, you're just told you should believe in this, not really having a reason or an experience to go on. And this was my experience that removed the societal norms from my mind as far as what my life should look like and what type of parent I should be, what my son needs based on what society says. And it put me in alignment with my calling as a mother.